Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings, fellow Sierra Leoneans. And greetings to all my blue colleagues of the blue movement all over the world. I am Bashiru Vandi, the founder and the global executive leader of the blue movement. I would like, first of all, to express my heartfelt and profound gratitude to all you members of the blue movement and the newly appointed members of management, of the global management of the blue movement, who've come on board to help make the blue project a reality. So in this video, I simply want to give a summary of what the blue movement is really about. I want to shed light on the motive, objective, vision, and strategy of the blue movement. As in all organizations, you must have a constructive and definitive aspiration and then strategize to work towards achieving your vision. And that's what we're doing in the blue movement. So I'm going to therefore clearly describe the blue movement, state the objectives, and then state how we intend to strategize, or the mechanism, our modus operandi in trying to achieve the aims and objectives of the blue movement. That's what I'm going to do very quickly in this audio. The blue movement is basically, a union of profoundly patriotic Africans with a staunch determination to productively contribute to the resolution of the African problem. What am I saying? Basically, we are a group of ordinary Africans, civilians, who believe that the resolution or solving the problems of our African continent and African nations is not the sole responsibility of politicians. We cannot just leave it to politicians. Yes, they run our nations, but they haven't got the solution to all the problems. Governments cannot solve it all. You and I, members of the civil estate, members of the interactive or media estate, the judicial estate, should all work together to make the restoration of dignity to Africa a reality. So in the blue movement, we are doing our bit in trying to organize and unite civilians around this noble cause of fighting for the same aim of redeeming Africa from its chronic, fundamental, and debilitating problems. So that's it. That's basically what the blue movement is about. Coming together as Africans and civilians, bringing our ideas together, bringing our resources, contributing financially, intellectually, energetically, in all ways, emotionally, to help make Africa, a habitable, a convenient paradise for all of us. So that is the vision, that is the aim, what you and I can do to help the resolution process. So now, if that's the aim, then obviously you should be able to visualize the objectives that I'm going to talk about. What are our motives? Well, to talk about the motives, I'll explain the purpose and the objective of the blue movement. You see, what's the purpose of the blue movement? You see, the blue movement basically exists to act as three major things. First of all, to act as a civil platform, where civilians from all backgrounds, we are non-partisan, non-political. So we are a union of civilians from all social, economic, and political backgrounds who see it fit and reasonable to come together and think of putting the nation first by thinking of ways we can contribute to community development. Think of ways we can devise strategies to help each other face or tackle the problems that we face not only at home in Africa or in Sierra Leone, but also abroad. Because the suffering of Africans, believe you me, is not limited to those in Africa. Even abroad, there are brothers and sisters of ours that are also struggling and suffering. But because we are so divisive, because we lack the cohesive fabric that holds other ethnic minorities together, Africans suffer the most when they are in difficulties. So the aim of the Blue Movement is to create a platform that will provide that uniting influence, impact in our communities, both home and abroad. The other purpose of the Blue Movement is to become the modern face of the African struggle. This is very important. You see, Africans have not been sitting on their hands throughout their struggles in history. We've had the civil rights in America and across the world. We've had a struggle for independence. We've got even historical battles, like in my country, Bashiru fought against the hot tax war. So our struggle has been consistent. But what I'm trying to say in the Blue Movement is this, that our struggle today is different from the struggles of the old, of the past. It's all about the same thing, but it is a bit different today. You see, our ancestors were physically handcuffed, chained. So there was a physical reason for them to fight back. It was evident. It was visible. There were no, there were laws, barring them from voting. And therefore there was something physical for them in society to fight against. Today, it is much more subtle. You can vote. You can have the same passport as a white man. You can use, the same environment, the same seat. You can ride on the same bus, the same plane. But the battle that we have today is much more complex, much more destructive, and much more serious. It is called psychological servitude. You see, there is an appearance, a semblance of freedom. But in fact, you are absolutely manacled or shackled to the pillars of backwardness and statism. Psychological slavery is alive and kicking, and it is our target. It is often not seen, but it's destructive. Because when you are made to feel powerless, when you're made to feel poor when you're actually rich, when you're made to believe that you're inferior when you're not, and when you actually believe it, that gullibility makes psychological servitude worse, 1,000,000 times worse than the slavery that our ancestors had to endure. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Blue Movement, therefore, is the modern phase of the African struggle. This struggle is about the intellectual capability. We don't hate anyone. Africans today should not blame other people for our problems. We should stop hating others for our problems, because the only solution to our problem is not to expect somebody else to do it for us, but for us to do it for ourselves. If we want freedom, we have to take it. Not by force, not through war, but by simply demonstrating our ability to transform our capability into reality. Very simple. Unite, organize, think intelligently, and remember that we have in Africa, all the prerequisites that will enable us to succeed. So if we unite and use it, we wouldn't need to hate anyone or to blame anyone. We can become a powerful paradise on the global scene, the global scene, if only we're prepared to accept that we're not inferior and we're not poor, but we actually have the ammunition needed to propel us to that standard. So the modern struggle that we are conducting in the Blue Movement preaches against hatred towards any other race. I don't want to start blaming the white man today. Yes, his ancestors were responsible for our problems. But, the system that is against us is actually working against even most white people and other races. So what I'm saying is, if we spend less time looking at what somebody is not doing for us and spend much more time concentrating on what we can do for ourselves, we can monumentally transform our societies into, a gleaming paradise. That's the message. So that is what I mean by the modern struggle. The modern struggle does not hate. It does not preclude, integrationism. No, we're not against globalism or global interaction or global trade. No. What we focus on in the modern struggle, in the Blue Movement, is this. We believe that the African is intelligent, that Africa is a rich continent, that Africa is a global power, and that the responsibility to make all these adjectives and descriptions that I've given a reality rests on us, not the white man. He's never going to do it. He will never do it, because us staying where we are is in his interest. And therefore, expecting solutions to come from the West and from the Arab world is a futile effort that will only worsen and compound our predicament. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, in the Blue Movement, in this modern struggle, we say the solution to the African problem can only come from the African. So that is the purpose of the Blue Movement, to create a civil platform and to actually lead and conduct the modern phase of the African struggle. Now, what is the vision? What are the objectives? Well, you see, a vision is basically a general aspiration, of an organization, of an individual. Our vision in the Blue Movement is, of course, to tackle the African problem. And what is the African problem? The African problem is basically one word: powerlessness. Socially powerless because we're divisive, not cohesive. Socially powerless because our academic output is impotent. We have all these degrees. We are very brilliant at learning, at amassing degrees and all these qualifications. But we don't produce the things that we need. We are profusely consumerist. We import almost everything. So that reliance, that dependence, creative dependence, transforms into social powerlessness. When the things that we need to survive are predominantly produced by someone else, we are bound to be submissive. We are bound to be exploited. You cannot expect equality when you are profusely dependent, ladies and gentlemen. They are very contradictory, divergent. There will never be equality unless Africa becomes self-sufficient. So that's the social powerlessness. Economically, we are powerless. We have failed so far to transform our potential wealth into practical wealth. That's the economic powerlessness. And therefore, the outcome of that is rampant poverty in a land that teems with gold, diamonds, bauxite, iron ore. Economic powerlessness is an aspect of the African problem. Politically, we are powerless because, so far, there has been no pertinent connection between political ideology in Africa to the fundamental needs of the African continent. Africa needs freedom, and yet our political system is wholly dependent on foreign aid. Such people, leaders that we've had, especially the current crop of leaders, with exceptions of few, are totally incapable. It cannot just provide the solutions, because there is no way a political system that is inherently, comprehensively dependent on foreign aid provide a solution to a continent or a society that needs freedom. So, socially we are divisive, economically we are poor in reality, and politically our political ideology is meaningless. So collectively, those three constitute the African problem of powerlessness. So the vision, therefore, is to effectively tackle this problem. What are the objectives? An objective It's a specific aim. You see, the vision is general, but the objective is specific. What specifically do you want to do to achieve your vision? Now, of course, well, obviously, our objectives are also threefold. Socially, we want to replace social powerlessness with social empowerment. Economically, we want to replace economic empowerment, economic powerlessness with economic empowerment. Politically, we want to replace political powerlessness with political empowerment. So, in other words, our objective specifically is to replace powerlessness with empowerment. Now, that can be achieved through a constructive strategy, which takes me to the next point. What is a strategy of the Blue Movement? You see, as I've said, a strategy is a mechanism, your modus operandi, in achieving your vision or your objectives. In the Blue Movement, like I've said, we are the civil estate. Our focus is on the civil estate. We know about our politicians and all what they've done, their failures and everything. But the Blue Movement wants to focus on what you and I are doing. What have we done? So in the Blue Movement, our strategy is as follows. To achieve this aim of effectively contributing to the resolution process, we are going to do the following. Number one, we're going to be professional. As you've seen, already we've started the professionalism. We have rolled out our vision. We have looked around the world to connect with fellow citizens and create, an assembly of productive minds to form the management, the global management of the Blue Movement. And then after that, we're going to, endorse our constitution. From then on, there are things we're going to do. So professional action is very important. So we're going to be professional in our conduct. That's the first strategy. Secondly, we are going to embark on sustainable wealth creation. Revenue is very important in whatever we do. So what are we going to do? We're going to ensure that in due course, we are not just going to be dependent on foreign aid. We're not going to be dependent on donations, but on the revenue that we generate innovatively. The other method in our strategy is systematic establishment. We are an African organization. You see, what we're going to establish in Africa constructively. We're going to start in Sierra Leone, establish there well, have a very strong management systems in all the provinces and district, and then we move to the other nation. Systematic establishment is part of our strategy. The other strategy that we've got is objectivity. You see, like I've said, we are non-partisan. That doesn't mean we don't talk about politics. I just want to clarify this. Being non-partisan means we as a unit do not promote any political party or political entity, and we do not focus as a unit. Individuals can do it outside the Blue Movement in their own way. But as the Blue Movement will never publicly endorse a political party or publicly be against a political party. We are objective. That's what it means by non-partisan. But we do talk about political issues. For instance, we can go to South Africa and say to the current South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, that the black economic empowerment was meant as the actual words say, to empower black people, to actually create a kind of parity between the majority of blacks, and the white. But what has happened? A cabal of corrupt politicians have connived with the establishment to deny that right and equality, to the majority of the black race. So we say to Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, use your presidency, to try to correct this monumental failure in government policy. We can go to Zimbabwe and say to Robert Mugabe, that Mr. Mugabe, yes, we endorse your contribution to Zimbabwe independence, but your government and your policies actually replaced white oppression with black oppression, and therefore we ended up viewing you as no different from the tyrant that you tried to replace. We can go to Tanzania and Rwanda and say bravo to President Kagame of Rwanda and John Magufuli of Tanzania, that you are on the right track. You are trying to change the face of Africa. You are trying to restore dignity to the African continent. But we just want to, implore you to at least, allow political pluralism and political democracy to prevail. Let the people be the judge of your actions. Do not try to monopolize things. Do not try to simply, or assume or insinuate that because you are doing these wonderful things, and therefore you and you alone should govern. Let the people decide that, or through in free and fair elections. We can go to Cameroon and say to Paul Biya that, look, it is absolutely stupid for Africans in this modern age not to be fighting over ideological policies, not to be fighting on how, on ideas, on how to develop Cameroon, but to simply fight to retain their colonial status. Francophone Cameroon fighting against Anglophone Cameroon. The comedy and the humiliation of such an outcome is palpable, Mr. Biya. So we say to you, get up. It is time for you to stand up and think yourself as an African with intelligence. Stop this war and stop the calamitous, genocide that are perpetrated mostly by your army. We can come to Sierra Leone and say to the current president, His Excellency Julius Maada Bio, that so far you have indeed implemented, commendable policies. In particular, the free education policy. You have restored economic discipline, which was missing in the despicable, corrupt years of the APC. That is quite right. But that, again, just like I've said to Magufuli and Paul Kagame, that does not give you the right to wholly and solely conduct this exercise with one target and one target only, the APC. Remember, everybody knows that corruption in Sierra Leone is a political disease that affects the APC and the SLPP. The SLPP in history, was also corrupt, just like the APC. So please, Mr. President, as you conduct this commendable, the commission, obviously, you're not the one that is directly conducting it, but it is done under your regime. So we expect the commission to conduct to carry out these investigations fairly, to target corruption wherever it exists, because the APC is not the only corrupt one. There are a lot of civil servants, most of whom, many of whom are SLPP, who were at the forefront of siphoning and embezzling government funds. So let the Commission of Inquiry, target corruption wherever it is found, not just in the APC. That's the message we have for you. You see, so that's the objectivity I'm talking about. When we talk about politics, we talk about the real issues, the pros and the cons. We don't, avoid politics. We just do it objectively and constructively. Okay, so that's one of the ways we are going to conduct our movement to achieve our vision. The other way, which is the most important strategy, is what I refer to as reflective ideology. What does that mean? It basically means, if you have a mentality and you have principles and you believe in a set of values, then you must become those values. If you believe in change, then you yourself must change your mentality. If you oppose corruption, then you must be honest. That is what I mean by reflective ideology. And in this reflective ideology, there are 8 principles that we refer to as the 8 pillars of the Blue Movement. The first one is patriotism. In the Blue Movement, we are patriots. And what do we mean by patriotism? Patriotism is not just about, being vocal about the national anthem and wrapping yourself off in the national flag. No. Patriotism is that belief in nationhood, fellowship, collective prosperity, the respect that you have for the rights of your fellow citizen, just like you would expect your rights to be respected. That is patriotism. Collective prosperity, collective welfare, collective dignity. That's what we mean by patriotism. So in the Blue Movement, how do we demonstrate that? Well, we demonstrate it by enforcing our law or our rule of inclusiveness. Everybody is welcome in the Blue Movement, and no discrimination, no prejudice is allowed. Rights is also another principle in the Blue Movement. We respect the rights of the individual, freedom of speech, freedom of association, the right to vote, the right to legal equality, the rule of law. We respect all these values. And in the Blue Movement, we demonstrate it by being very transparent in our execution of policy and in the protection of the rights of the Blue member in accordance with the Blue Charter, which is our constitution. Our other the other aspect of our policy that is reflective, that we demonstrate, is that of integrity. Like I've said, we oppose corruption vehemently, and in the Blue Movement, we ensure that we have instituted a sound economic system that is transparent, that can be easily scrutinized, and a system that is a profound deterrent to fraud and corruption. Okay, and that's it. And it's not just financial corruption. Institutional corruption is also detested by us, and therefore, in the Blue Movement, institutions are empowered. We have 8 autonomous divisions that are our own institutions, and those institutions are empowered to operate autonomously with reasonable independence and with effective outcomes. They are not compromised or somehow forced to behave expediently for the interest of myself, the leader. No. So that is how we demonstrate integrity in the Blue Movement. Innovation is another emblem of our mentality. Innovation is, in the Blue Movement, we believe in solution. We are the solution age, the solution generation. We don't only believe in protest. We spend less time protesting and more time thinking about solutions. Innovation is therefore paramount in our mentality. When there is profound poverty, we discuss ways of creating jobs for our people. When there is when there is problems with education, we also contribute, in various ways of trying to upgrade the quality and standards of education. Even in our program of the Blue Movement, we have academic sessions where we actually answer questions for students in our program. Come to the Blue Movement groups whenever you can and see how we do that. So innovation is very paramount, where we try to come up with innovative solutions to the social, economic, and political problems that we face. The other aspect of our values that we believe in is independence. We believe that independence is the key to sustainable development. If there is no economic independence, you will struggle to actually achieve your aspirations, because the donors, your beneficiaries, will determine the extent to which you progress. But if you are in control of everything, then you will determine how far you go. That's why independence is very important to us in the Blue Movement. And how do we demonstrate that? In the Blue Movement, you've heard me say already that when our aim in 8, 9, 10 years time, or 7, 8, 9, 10 years time, is to elevate ourselves to the status where we will no longer rely on donations and even membership fees, because we are thinking of very innovative, revenue generation mechanisms that will enable us to say, look, we don't rely on donations, we can fund ourselves, and we can actually fund government, fund societies, fund our fellow Africans, fund potential entrepreneurs in our midst, fund scholarships, fund all those developmental strategies that will enable, that will help us contribute productively to the resolution process. You see, so independence is very important to us. The other aspect of our policy, of our ideology that we value so much is discipline. You see, where there's no discipline, there is no order, and when there's no order, there's breakdown of engagement. And therefore, in the Blue Movement, we value commitment to the cause, and we value productive outcomes, we value target-driven mentality, and we value result. You must achieve result as a member of management. Even as a member, we give you targets in the Blue Movement. All of us, managers, members, have targets. Discipline is very paramount in our mentality. Democracy is also paramount. You see, for us, democracy is not just a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. That colonial definition is inadequate. Democracy, in our mentality, is the constructive and practical constitutional empowerment of the four estates. When the political estate is empowered, when the civil estate is empowered, when the judicial and interactive or fourth estate are empowered, society functions. But the problem we have in Sierra Leone today that has led to the social, economic, and political breakdown is simple. The reason for that is the total and comprehensive breakdown and collapse of institutional integrity. Okay? So that is why, because we hate that, that's why in the Blue Movement, we're trying to make sure our institutions are empowered. So democracy is very important. Enlightenment is important. You see, in Africa, the African must view the following in a very different way. Globalism, in our mentality, is not just about accepting and receiving everything that is given to us. No, globalism is about constructing a symbiotic relationship that is far different from a parasitic one. Okay, so globalism must be symbiotic in our mentality. Education must be creative, not just theoretical in our mentality. Politics should be about problem solving, not electing thieves to public office. You see, so we interpret this concept differently, and we do so with the progress and sustainable, with the progressive and sustainable development of Africa in our minds. Okay, so that's another aspect of our reflective ideology. So, ladies and gentlemen, patriotism, right, innovation, independence, discipline, democracy, and enlightenment are the 8 pillars on which the Blue Movement was founded. Therefore, in conclusion, it is with pride that I assert and emphatically say to you that we in the Blue Movement pledge to be resolute in our desire for lasting change to a productive mentality, and with collective might help to victoriously construct the promised land. Thank you very much. And I'm Bashiru Vandi.